pasta, even though they're high schoolers and college kids. Yeah. Oof. No problem. So I wanted to come and talk a little bit about Family Promise. I know you guys have been a host church for many years, but through the pandemic and going forward, we've made some changes. We've worked to kind of meet the community where they are. There is a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to make you guys flip through it while we're here. We're going to kind of be more conversational, but there is a link that can be sent out if you guys would like to see it. It's got a lot of stats. It also is going to tell you all the information about the programs that I'm going to talk about. So Family Promise throughout the pandemic, one of the things that we did was we sent all of our staff through what's called trauma-informed care training. And what that has shown us is that as with everything in the world, we've become more aware of the importance of mental health. And with mental health, one of the things with trauma-informed care is how is homelessness affecting children? How is the plight of homelessness multi-generational? How is it a cyclical problem that is happening generation after generation to the same families? And so through trauma-informed care, one of the things that we found out was that the children that are experiencing homelessness are traumatized not only through homelessness, but through other associations and other organizations where the families are dismantled while they're going through this process, which is what makes Family Promise very unique. In Wake County, only Family Promise and Families Together are programs where families can stay together while they're experiencing homelessness. And what that means is most organizations, when a family loses their housing, requires the mom and the children to stay together, but the dad is not able to stay with the children. And then as soon as a boy turns the age of 13, he is considered a man and is not allowed to stay with his mother and siblings as well. So that's where Family Promise started all those years ago, was making sure that we could keep families together because they're already experiencing enough trauma losing their housing. Well, what we found additionally with some research that's been done from a combination of UNC Public Health, Duke hospitals, and the Mayo Clinic is that when we are taking families and putting them in hotels, when we're moving them from church to church each week, we are re-traumatizing the children because they don't understand that that's not a stable environment. Even though they're with their families, it's still re-traumatizing them because all they can think is, where am I sleeping tonight? Why am I having to go back to the day center? Why am I showering here? Why are my belongings locked in a locker? It's something that children don't understand, and we can't expect them to understand it. And by re-traumatizing them and having their mental health affected at such a young age, it's ingrained in them to not feel safe for the rest of their lives. And so as we've learned that information, that's one of the reasons that we've decided to stay in a static model. We were fortunate enough to write for a grant. So the apartments next door, 4 of those apartments, will stay shelter forever. And so what that means is, I don't know if you guys have been able to tour the apartments next door. If you have not and you're interested, please let me know. But those are former NC State housing. And so they are set up like a dormitory. Each apartment has 3 bedrooms. Each bedroom has its own personal bathroom, closet, beds for makeup. We move the beds around depending on the size of the family that's in that room. And then it has a full living room and a full kitchen. So we are at the point now where when we were trying to move back in the rotation and trying to figure out, how we were going to do that and not traumatize families, we're at the point now where we're back to being able to serve 8 or 10 families in shelter by having them in those apartments next door, because we can put 2 or 3 families, depending on their size, in those apartments. The other 8 apartments will stay transitional housing. And this is where our programs have been able to kind of migrate to, where we are calling it a continuum of care. So the transitional housing that is there is if we have a family that comes in and they're having a health crisis, or they're underemployed because they've not received a high school diploma, so they need to get their GED. If they're in an unfortunate situation where they have multiple evictions or repossessions on their credit, and we're not able to work with the creditors within that normal kind of 3 to 4 month period they're in shelter, this gives them a year to get that. They can get fully employed rather being underemployed. We can help them find health insurance and partner them with, Medicaid or Medicare, or hopefully even a position that provides that. That's one of the nice things that remote work has come out of. We actually have families currently that are working as on Amazon, like if you're calling in and you're saying, "Where's my package? I don't know where it is." They're the people that are answering your phone calls because they can work remotely next door. We're providing tablets or laptops or computers, depending on what their position is and requires, but they're next door. And so they have a full year to work with our case managers if they need that in transitional housing. If a family comes in and it's just a hiccup, just a bump in the road, and our case managers can work with them to get them housed quickly, one of the things that the government programs are focusing on is housing first, then wraparound services. So a family has had a job loss, or COVID has knocked them out of being able to work and they've got long COVID, but we can hook them up with a job where they can work remotely. So we have 2 programs. One is Rapid Rehousing, which is a HUD-funded program where we move a family into housing, and then our case managers spend the next year working with them to become fully employed. Again, get a GED, get an associate's degree from the community college, work with them to find healthcare providers so that they can meet their healthcare needs. And in the first few years, that rent is reduced and met with a HUD stipend. So it's similar to Section 8 housing way in the past where, families were put in housing together. Now these families are dispersed through the community because what we found, both governmentally and mental health, is the families don't have the support systems that we have. They don't have large families around them. They don't have a church around them. They don't have a school around them because the community is not something that they're ingrained in yet. So by placing them in our neighborhoods or placing them in an apartment community, they're able to build that support network by finding friends and a church and things of that nature, Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups, anything that the family can be involved in first, and then the case managers work with them. The second program that's a housing first program is called New Lease on Life, and that's a program that's with the Triangle Apartment Association. And the Triangle Apartment Association is any combination of apartments in the area that belong to this association. What they're doing is they're pledging to have 2 or 3 units in their apartment complex that is for affordable housing. And so we can move a family into there, and it's a 3-year program. The first year, they pay about 1/3 of the rent. The second year, they pay about 1/2 of the rent. And then hopefully by the 3rd year, they've worked through the program with our case managers and are able to afford a full-time rent. I will tell you, New Lease on Life has a 100% success rate. And we run that for the entire county, so not just Family Promise. If someone goes through Salvation Army or Oak City Cares or comes to us from a congregation, we run that program for the whole county, not just for our families. And so that's something that is really successful because what they're also doing, just like in transitional housing, they're putting about $150 a month away in an escrow account that builds up over those 2 or 3 years. So on the back end, they have a savings account so that if they were to have a hiccup in the road, they would have that money. So our 2 new programs that started in 2022, again, based off of this idea of reducing trauma, the biggest way to reduce trauma is to have someone not lose their housing in the first place. And so we were able to get grants to start 2 new programs. One is a prevention program, and it's with the McKinney-Vento social workers at each of the Wake County schools. So a social worker can call us and say, Mom or Dad just called me. They're worried they're going to have to change schools because, they're a month away from an eviction. And so there's paperwork that comes to us. Our case managers pay, with money out of the grant, they pay the back rent or the back mortgage or a car payment, whatever needs to be done so they keep their housing and they can keep their employment, and then they go into the case management system. So it's wrapping around those services after. So they are able to keep a family in their house to avoid the trauma on the children from the beginning. And that's really the goal here, is to make sure that the children feel safe, because if we can stop that in the beginning, we can stop that cyclical cycle of homelessness. And then the other new program is a stabilization program. It's also a prevention program, but it's dollars only able to be accessed by families that have gone through our emergency shelter. And so a family's gone through our emergency shelter, it's been 4 or 5 years, they're working full time, they're living in an apartment, but oh my goodness, their transmission went out. Well, who can afford $2,500 for a new transmission? But they need their car to get to work, because if they don't get to work, they're going to lose their job, which in turn they're going to lose their housing. And so what they can do is they can come back to Family Promise once every 3 years if needed. They can come back to Family Promise and say, can you pay my rent this month so that I can do this car bill, or so that I can pay for my diabetics medication, or whatever large bill comes out of kind of left field. And then what they do is they come back into the case management system, and our caseworkers work with them to say, what happened to the savings? Let's start this. Let's look at your budget. Let's redo all of this. Let's start building escrow again. So again, the family is not cyclically coming back into the system. Those two programs started in July, and we were hopeful that we would be able to serve 7 or 8 families. We served 18 between July and December, and 12 of those families were on the prevention side of things, coming out of the school social workers. They weren't our previous families who were going through a hardship. They were new families that we were able to keep from getting into the system in the first place. Those two programs are our only two programs that are not government funded. They are community funded. We have funding for those for the next 2 years. We're in the case management or the case test side of it right now. And so we hope to, by June, be able to release some numbers and information about that and bring it to the community for support. So that's one of the two big things. The other thing that I will tell you guys is we were able to serve 124 families this year, 240 children. That's the largest amount of families that we've helped in the lifetime of Family Promise. So we're at the point right now where we are moving past the pandemic. We're moving past the idea of families, being kind of stuck in their houses or being able to place families in hotels. We're back at the point where the families are coming to us for case management and we're placing in housing. I will also say, and this is a credit to all of you guys that are host families, whether you're hosting next door or whether you're hosting in congregations, national average for successful placement of families, and successful placement means you're going back 2 years later and looking to see if a family is still placed in their housing, is 43%. Family Promise, our number this year hit 77%. So again, a lot of it is, our case managers are tremendous. That's another thing that sets us apart, is that we have full-time case managers. We have 4 case managers and a Rashawn. Rashawn, our program manager, who a lot of you probably know, is phenomenal. He was an intern with us when he was at NC State and has stayed and made his career with us. He is able to connect to the community and really get programs going and making families feel wonderful and safe and loved. And I think that that's a true testament to what Family Promise has been able to become successful with. So I know that was a lot of information. The last piece of information that I wanted to give you guys, and then I'll open it up to questions. One of the reasons that Family Promise and the other organizations are still here, unfortunately, is because there is a lack of affordable housing in Wake County. It's a problem all over the world, a problem all over the United States, but it's a big problem here in Wake County because of the affluence that we have. I don't know how aware you guys are of this, but a 2-bedroom apartment in Wake County, the average price is $1,235, $1,235 a month. The reason that we talk about 2-bedroom housing is just like if you were sponsoring a foster child or just like in the adoption system, you have to have a separate room for children. They have to be able to have a separate space. So you have to have a 2-bedroom, parents in one room, children in the other. That equates to about $21.50 an hour that someone has to make to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Well, $7.25 is the minimum wage. So you're talking 3 full-time jobs to afford the housing. A lot of families that are facing homelessness are single-parent households. Just a dad, just a mom, auntie and the kids, grandma and grandkids. They cannot work 3 full-time jobs and afford this. So there's a lot that needs to be done. They're trying to make some affordable housing available in all of the new complexes that they're building. Taxation is saying 10% of your houses have to be, 10% of your new apartments have to be affordable. We'll see if it really goes through. There are also lots of things in place to raise our minimum wage, but again, it's going to raise slowly. I mean, we might get $9 and then it's 2.5 full-time jobs. So this is the reason that we're still, unfortunately, in business. I would love to be out of business because that would mean everybody in Wake County was served appropriately, but that's where we are. And then the other piece, someone asked me this actually before, and I wanted to just make sure everybody knew. One of the things Wake County Public School System does do, if you are experiencing homelessness, your children are allowed to stay in whatever school that they're in, and Wake County has to provide transportation. So if you ever drive past the day center in the morning on a school day, you'll see 5 or 6 different school transportation systems, buses that are taking kids to all different schools because, again, reducing the trauma on the children by allowing them to stay in their current school system so that people don't know. So, again, I know that was a lot of information. Questions? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Great question. So one of the things, obviously, it's still serving the families next door, dinner, groceries, things of that nature. But again, like I said before, one of the pieces that is very important for our families to remain successful is having a connection to the community. And so what we've done this fall is we've piloted a lot of different programs to see kind of what works. And we encourage congregations, whether it's during the week that you're hosting or any other time, to be as creative as possible. We've had groups come in that have rented the blow-up movie screens, and you've seen our parking lot, it's huge, put it up in the parking lot, brought camping chairs and roasted s'mores, and we watched Nemo. We rented they gave it to us. We're next to the intramural fields at NC State, and so we had a fall festival there where a congregation and one of the organizations at NC State, the kids painted pumpkins and they had sack races and just really fun things. Edenton Street is doing an ice cream social once a month with the families. We've done some kind of paint your pots with the families. Anything that you guys can think of, any way that you want to be involved. We have reached out and had folks, we've had some high schoolers who are going through exams and need some tutoring. And so we've been able to set up Zoom tutoring so that, if you're not necessarily comfortable going into a small space or enclosed space yet, you can still volunteer. We've also done some Zoom in story nights where we've had some volunteers that we baked cookies, and then the volunteer zoomed in and read a story for the kids. We've had the symphony come in and do some things. We've also had a Mom and Me group from Greenwood Baptist. They host a Mom and Me group there, and they came and drove our vans, and so we get free tickets to Marbles for our families, and so they drove the vans, and the Mom and Me group met them there, and so they all did a Mom and Me group together with our families at Marbles. There's a lot of different things we can do. One of the churches close to us had 2 volunteers come over and drove the vans to their church so our families could go to their trunk or treat. So anything that you guys can think of, anything creative, I am willing to try, because it's very important to get our families connected to the community, to have them feel comfortable, to know that they are welcome in the community, but it's also important for them to be able to be kids and do the fun things that our kids get to do just because they were fortunate enough to be born into our family. And so the other piece is we are bringing back classes. The parents are going to go have classes available on Tuesday evenings. Those, cooking classes, financial classes, but also just those life balance classes, yoga and hair care and a spa night and a nails night. So we will still need volunteers to come in and watch the children those nights. Those start again every other week starting February 28th. So I will have a Sign Up Genius out for that in the coming weeks. Also, if you teach a class that you think our parents may be interested in, crocheting, basket weaving, cross-stitching, anything that you do for fun or to relax is something that, I think it's important for our families to be introduced to as well. Absolutely. In the past, we had robotics groups from NC State, Girl Scout troops, all kinds of groups. So. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Absolutely. If you are connected to a business, if you are connected to a women's group or a men's group that gives grant funding, I am so happy to go out and share our mission and talk to those groups, because we are going to continue to need funding to grow. Just to let you guys know, prior to the pandemic, our budget was typically in the $400,000 range. We will be close to $1 million this year for all of the programs that we need to get. The other piece of that is we have actually been working with other counties. We are Family Promise of Wake County right now. We will, this is our 30th year, so we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary. We were incorporated in '93 in September, and then we saw our first families in July of '94. So for the next 15 months or so, we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary, and one of that is extending to be probably Family Promise of the Triangle. And the reason for that is a lot of the funding and large organizations, as he was mentioning, are coming to Morrisville and Durham. And a lot of them, Cisco and some of the others that we've tried to write for, because we're Wake County and they're technically Durham County, we can't write for those funds. And so, number one, that will expand our funding. But number two, the other thing that we're seeing success with currently is placing families in Garner, placing families in Mebane, placing families in Henderson and Pittsboro. So on the outskirts of kind of where we are now, we're seeing success placing families out there in those communities because it is a bit more affordable than Raleigh or Cary happens to be. Yep. Yep. We do. So we are set up for life giving. And so we can be written into a will. We can be written into your life insurance. You know, 30% to this child, 30% to this child, 30% to Family Promise. We also are able to receive matching funds. We have Benevity and some of the others that, you know, UNC Chapel Hill and IBM and some of the larger groups here do, you know, you give $500, they give $500 in your name. We are able to do those as well. So that's a lot of things that we've actually been able to build over the pandemic. We were able to kind of step back and look at kind of the financial resources and where we could be smarter and come, you know, into the 21st century. Yeah, we typically got about $3,500 a year, so it was a very nice check to get at the end of the year from Amazon Smile. I know they are looking to. They still have their foundation, and they are looking to grant in local areas. But yes, that is something that we will be missing. I will say on the flip side of that, I don't know if any of you are part of the state employees combined campaign. If you work for the state or did work for the state and earmark, you know, $5 to whatever, they are actually picking up some of that and doing some matching funding. So again, we typically get about $5,000 from people across the state donating to us through the state employees combined campaign, and they are going to be doing, I think it's like pennies on the dollar or 2 pennies on the dollar, but it will make up for some of that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So we used to be able to, before Wake County and also government funding, change the way that you could, if you were receiving government funding, you have to go through what's called the coordinated entry system now. Before, you could call us or send a family to us, and we would go through the vetting process, and if they were a fit for us, then we could pull them into our programming. This is why I was talking about those 2 prevention program dollars are very important, because we can use those to help anybody in any way that we want. But the government funding, so emergency shelter and rapid rehousing and new lease on life, what happens is you call us and say, you know, Joe Freeman that I met, you know, he and his family need help. What can you guys do? We actually have to send them to either Oak City Cares or Dorcas Ministry if they're in Cary, and they put their name into a database. They take all of their information, and they are listed in the database based on vulnerability. So if they're living in Tent City, high vulnerability. If they're living in their car, high vulnerability. If they are doubled up in a house, middle vulnerability. If they are about to lose their housing, but they are still in a house, middle vulnerability. So they're ranked, and then what happens is when we have an opening, Rashawn or one of the case managers that's working with the emergency housing, they go into that system and start calling down the list based on vulnerability to see if they fit with our program, if they're still experiencing homelessness, or if they've found some other way to help. Unfortunately, I will say there are about 500 names that are on that list. And for families, we have 10, Families Together has 7. So we can help 17 families in emergency shelter in Wake County at a time. So that list is very long and typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks to move up that list. We have other resources that we can connect them with, including moving them to another county, another Family Promise there's one in Henderson, there's one in Wilmington that we have relationships with. So if a family, especially if a family has small children that aren't in school yet, and they don't have any ties to this specific area, we work with the other Family Promises to do that. But unfortunately for those programs, because we take government funding, we have to work through the coordinated entry system. in my pie in the sky world, we never take government funding anymore, and we can go back to doing what we want and helping people. However, on the flip side, as we said, we've been able to help more people this year than we ever have before by having all of the different programs that we have. Yeah. So if you just want to send me, my email is the contact email on the website. If you send me an email with your information, I can connect you to Rashawn as the program manager. He builds those relationships. And we do actually host twice a year. We host job fairs at Family Promise, and that's sent out to all of our families, even our graduates, and so they come back and meet with those. So that's terrific. If anybody has any employment, we would love to connect that. No problem. Thank you, guys. And again, shoot me an email. Hope has my cell phone. Feel free to text me. I can answer any questions at any time.
Thank you. Thank you. I am just so